some specific examples of some hard value ethical trade-offs that we've run into before on this show. And the first one, the example that you kind of asked about, was with this contact tracing, because as Americans, it's kind of a part of our value system that we're raised in to like viscerally respond negatively to anything that infringes on like our freedom. And a lot of that has to do with anything that infringes on our rights to privacy. And so you think about contact tracing and how so many Americans immediately just push back on that and want to riot in the streets because they don't want our information to be shared, especially with the government. But then I talked to some of my colleagues who are from places like China, where their value systems and what they were raised believing are so different when it comes to privacy. And this isn't even just with contact tracing. This is true of the social credit system too, which Americans seem so adamantly against. But then people who are raised in communities that care a little bit more about a like communal approach towards values and ethics, they actually don't really care about holding on to their privacy quite as much. So it's not really a negative thing to them, but it's negative for us. And so, like Dylan was saying, we have to constantly check our biases and ask, well, should we tell people that this is a bad technology because we feel so strongly about privacy? Or should we tell them this is an infringement on privacy? How you feel about privacy is how you feel about whether this is right or wrong. And that's like a pretty clear-cut and dry example of two different communities feeling something differently or even opposing. And then you think about something like facial classification and facial recognition software, like we were talking with Deb Raji about, and that one's even more difficult because you have, even just taking the United States, you have facial recognition and classification algorithms that are honestly like blatantly discriminating against people of color. And they're way less accurate for people of color. And so you can call the algorithm racist, even if it's intentional or unintentional. And so many people would immediately probably jump to that and say, well, we need to fix this algorithm. We need to make it less racist. We need to make it just as accurate for all people of all types of races and all types of skin colors. And then when you talk to people like Deb Raji, you realize, well, okay, if you make the system and the facial recognition model accurate for everyone, well, then there's more unintended consequences and racist implications there, because then we can help the police over-surveil communities that were already being over-policed and communities that are already marginalized. And so there's some tensions with some of the possible like action items that come from these this different research that we're seeing people doing in these spaces. And so I think it's really difficult. It's not an easy answer. We don't really talk to these scholars and come out of these interviews with always like an immediate feeling of, yes, this is what's right, this is what's wrong, this is what we need to do, and this is what we're going to tell the community to do. Unless it's like something that's like clearly racist, then like I think there's a few things that Dylan and I can agree on we're going to promote and push for and tell people what is right and wrong, at least from our perspective and from the people that we're talking to and their perspective. But there's a lot of gray areas where we just really can't say what is right and wrong. And so, yeah, that's where the transparency comes in, I guess.
Yeah. I think that sometimes these conversations also can go into this spot where we say, oh, well, everyone's just trying their best and like there's no responsibility, right? Or like, oh, we're just in this like incredibly intersubjective space and there's no, like these are the philosophers, right? There's no truth here whatsoever. Like, and I think that a lot of these scholars that are out there that we've interviewed and that you've interviewed as well, like that there are some North Stars out there, right? Like the work that Timnit's doing at Google, the work that Jen Wortman-Bond, who we recently interviewed, is doing at Microsoft. Like there are these folks who have spent their careers as experts in this, who have pinpointed practical ways that we can move forward as a data science community, as a technological community. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to be an iterative process, and there are all of these different difficulties with it. But there are folks out there who have really defined what those North Stars are. So I don't think we want to come across saying that like, well, there's no North Stars that we don't believe in, things like that. Like I think we fall in line with a lot of these folks who are out there leading the field in terms of responsible AI right now.
Thank you so much for listening to this clip of the Data Talk podcast. To check out the full show or see the full catalog of previous episodes, go to Experian.com/Data Talk.